Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. All right, hopefully we are live. Welcome everybody back to a Friday night live stream here at Christ Center Ironworks. This evening we're going to be doing something a little bit different and a bit unplanned. So I've kind of got embroiled into a bit of a project here, which we'll go to here in just a second at camera number 2. But I just got going on this project after being taking a little bit of hiatus from it for a little bit, and I'm trying to get it done in time for Quad State. So if y'all don't know what that is a gathering of blacksmiths at the Miami County Fairgrounds in Troy, Ohio. Happens at it's always the 4th weekend in September. You can go check out sofablacksmiths.org if you want to find out more about it. But it is the largest blacksmith gathering in North America. And tools and all sorts of good stuff. And they got galleries. And well, hopefully this year I'll get to enter this little item into the gallery. And it'll be pretty good. So hopefully the stream's coming in really well. We had some error bars and some things on our end. So please let us know if the feed's coming in good to you and audio's all good and all that good jazz. And how are you doing, Jess? And who do we have?
We have quite a few. We have Mountain Home Forge, Robert Lannis, Chris Schaefer. Ron Sage says looks good. Wiley says smooth on my end. Jeff Woodring, video and audio are fine. So
good. All right. That just must be some sort of thing that YouTube's glitching out about. They do that from time to time. They do that from time to time. So good to know that we got good audio and good visuals going on, huh?
Yes, that is good to know.
Ain't that right? So, okay. So, how many people we got? Give me a quick stat.
Stats, quick. We currently have 40 viewers.
Sweet. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for being the early birds. Greatly appreciate it. Now, for all you early birds, it's your job to tell everybody else who comes in later when they say, "What are we doing?" You can answer that question, huh? You can answer that question for them. So let's go to the project, Jess.
All right.
Go to camera number 2. So hopefully they can see this okay, can they? Can they see the design all right and everything?
Yep.
Okay. I'll probably unlock it from the vise just to showcase what this is actually going to be in the long run here. And kind of my setup, I'll go over that real quick. So this is a cross-peen hammer I am working on for a client. This has been a 2-year in the process making kind of hammer. No fault of the client's, mostly the fault of my own because it takes time to do this type of work to this. I haven't been working solidly like I said, this has been sitting on the bench for a little while and I'm just getting back around to working on it after closing a lot of other jobs. But basically what we're going to be doing is, can they see that in focus, all that's really good?
Yeah, it's in focus.
Basically what I am doing is I'm doing boss relief engraving. So, or you could call it deep relief engraving. So I'm carving out all the backdrop around my design. Okay? And that's the part of the boss relief portion. And then, so let's get this all colored up here. So I'm removing the background, if you will, of this whole engraving. But then it's not going to just stay this way. The other part of the boss relief engraving is the fact that all of this is going to get sculpted with hammers, with really fine little planishing hammers and chasing chisels, things like that. This is all going to get sculpted in different directions and give it 3-dimensional form. So it really allows the piece to stick up and really stand out on the side. So this is what you would consider. This is what you consider like a classical designed panel hammer. So you have panels or windows that are inset. You'll find this on all sorts of different types of ironwork out there, from chests to jewelry. And this is what we're working on now. I'm starting on the bottom. So as you can see, everything around here is all flush and in one plane. Hopefully they can see that all right. They see that okay? Can everybody see how that's all flush in one plane?
Yep.
Everything's in plane. And we don't want that, because obviously if we try to shape our design, it's not going to do anything for us. It's just going to look like we dented stuff up. So we have to remove that backdrop away. So that's what we're working on this evening. Is it raining a little bit?
Yeah, it just started sprinkling.
All right, well, hopefully it doesn't get too bad, huh? So we can keep going.
I can always get bags to throw over the cameras if I have to.
Yeah, we'll see it. We'll tough it out. Can they see the depth there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can they see the depth on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. So this takes a lot of work. I've been working at this side here for a day and a half so far. So about 12 hours or so just for this side. And I'm not finished. So I'm going to be continuing to work down this area. I need to do a little profiling with a little more profiling to crisp this up with my engraver or with my graver. Little graving chisel I made here. And then I will come back and I will planish the backdrop down, and then I will scrape the back. And that's how you get that matted texture. There's a scraping on the back, if they can see that there, that kind of that texturing going on there.
Yep.
Good.
Mr. Coffee says, is that the hammer I think it is? Is that the hubcap hammer?
It is. It is the hubcap hammer. So hopefully this is going to be one really gorgeous hammer once we get it all done. So, like I said, just to get to this point, the outlining and finishing just to where I'm at right now has been a day and a half of work just for this portion. So it's a very slow, sometimes grueling process, but it can be quite rewarding. Let me put that away. Another thing you might note, and this is just a quick little handy tip here for you, I've got several things going on with this vise. Just point this out while we're here. So first and foremost, I've got copper jaws on it because the jaws here have serrated teeth on my vise jaws, which is generally bad for decorative work. You can maybe see the serrations in there, how it bites in. Well, you would get that on your hammer if you did not grip it in a pair of copper jaws. So that helps smooth that out. And then in addition, I add a bit of, just blue paper towel. You can use a white rag, whatever tickles your fancy, put down as an additional padding and a buffer for the hammer, to prevent any sort of galling that I would get on the sides of the hammer. The other trick that I've got going on here is I've got a wood block. Let's go up to camera number 1 real quick.
All right.
Can they see that?
Yep.
So I've got a wood block that's in the vise that is supporting the hammer, so this way it doesn't get any suck down. You know how when you've been hammering on something in the vise, it just keeps slipping down and down and down, and you got to regrip and it goes down and down and down, and you got to regrip and it goes down and down and down. Well, that's what leads to galling on the sides of your thing, and we just simply cannot have that on this hammer. Once we finish a side and we've put our, once this is fully finished out, I estimate there to be about 25 to 30 hours of work per side. So once that's done, you don't want to have to go back and oh man, there's a bunch of gall marks all over my beautiful work, and have to figure out another way of sanding or cleaning all that up later on. So what that does is this sits on the actual screw of the vise. This sits on there, and then it's just thin enough so it's not the same size as the hammer. So the hammer is gripped by the vise, but it's supported on this block. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
For anybody out there doing finish work, don't overthink it. Use the stuff you've got on hand. You'll be thankful you did.
Eddie Bradford says, that's beautiful.
Well, thank you very much, Eddie.
Dan's Creation says, very ornate.
Thank you, Dan. All right, we'll set that down in there.
Bar Run Forge says, that's a beauty, younger brother.
Hello, little T-Roy. All right. Hopefully it'll hold up well.
Coffee's Forge says, dude, above and beyond.
that's what I try for when I can. When I can. All right, I'm going to come in here. And so while I'm working on this, there's going to be a lot of like boring tippity-tap work. I'm going to try to make it to where you guys can see what I'm doing. This is very hard work to actually like film and take pictures of and get video clips of, because it requires me to move a lot, right? It requires me to move a lot. And with that moving, I'm going to block the camera a lot. That's going to happen this evening. So I figured in this stream what we could do is make it a really nice Q&A stream, so I can answer some questions while I do my work. That way when we get into parts where you just really can't see what I'm doing, and then we'll do like little updates along the way. But that way we've got it, you know, we get the best of both worlds, basically. You guys get to see a little work being done, and then the work that you can't see, you're busy listening to questions being answered.
Mm-hmm. Do you like a few comments and questions?
That's what I'm here for.
All right. Gordon Farmer says, Roy, I've decided to take time to do more education than blacksmithing, and sorry, haven't been in the streams. Education has to take up more time.
That's all right. You got to educate yourself, Gordon. And, you know, you'll get back to it when you're ready. So take all the time you need, Patty.
Jeff Woodring says, will you add color definition to the background?
Yeah. So this will be a matted finish. So most likely what I'm going for is I'm going for a blued finish. So this will have a gun blued finish in the backdrop. And then the surfaces, everything that's proud of the backdrop, will be mirror finish. So it'll be shiny. So it'll have a nice contrast between the highs and the lows, if you will.
Chris Schaefer says he's stuck in traffic on 127.
Oh no. Poor feller.
That salty dog Chris says, just got out of surgery. They gave me my phone back. Woo, not missing the stream.
Woohoo! Congratulations for getting out of surgery. I hope you're all right.
Ron Sage says, looking good. You might be able to make a living blacksmithing. Haha.
Don't tell that to my critics. Don't tell that to my critics. This is not a way to make a living at blacksmithing. This has come from a very patient customer that, you know, originally just started off wanting to have anything I wanted to create them, basically. Just, it's like, well, whatever you want to do, take your, you know, put your artistic talents to work, right? And, well, I went overboard. And this has slowly morphed into the beast that it is now. I could never make a living doing this type of high detailed work, high-end work on hammers and sell them. There's just not a market for it, really. I mean, there might be, but people have got to have some pretty deep pockets. Because when I get done, this hammer would probably, if I put it in my shop, when somebody happened to pry it out of my cold dead fingers, it would probably be in the upper probably $3,000 or $4,000 range, just for the amount of labor, of love that's in this thing. So not because it's a useful item that's worth $4,000, it's just purely for the wow factor and the amount of skill that goes into crafting this style of hammer.
Wiley asked if the engraving is done pre-heat treat.
Yep. You have to do it pre-heat treat. Well, I guess you don't have to. It just depends on what you make your gravers out of. My gravers are made out of like a spring steel, like a 5160. If you're making them out of like an A2 or something like that, like more like a drill bit steel or something, that is, you're just grinding the thing to shape, and it's not like made from coil spring like my gravers are here, then you could get away with a higher carbon, already heat treated piece. Or if they were made from like carbide, if they were made from like a piece of carbide and just ground, you would be able to work on really high carbon steel that's already been heat treated. But considering I don't have that, this is all done pre-heat treat, which increases the risk factor. So when it goes in the quench, instead of you losing a lunk of metal that maybe took you half a day of forging to make, you're losing a lunk of metal that has 100+ hours into it at that juncture. So high risk, high reward if it all comes together.
Frank Strock says, hey gang, what's up?
What's up, Frank? Good to see you, brother.
Stormhawk says, hey Roy, do you do acid etchings?
Nope, I've never really gotten into acid etching. You could possibly do an acid etch for a simple design. Acid etching is really only going to work for shallow depth type stuff. What I'm doing here in the three-dimensionality that this is going to have afterwards with all the sculpting of the boss relief engraving, you just couldn't get that with acid etching. I've done some acid etching in the past of like some logos and stuff into the side of things, and it's really hard to get a good, clean, crisp, deep etch, like something that would really eat away and get down to this depth. It would just be surface level, you know, kind of a surface level thing. So, but yeah, I've played around with it a little bit, like an electro etch, if that's what he's asking. There's a bunch of different types of etching out there.
Sean Anderson says there would be a hammer-shaped hole in the wall. I don't have enough patience for that.
We talked about this, Sean. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Just takes a little bit of time and practice.
Robert Lannis asked if that's a chasing chisel.
Nope, this is a engraving chisel. So some quick things about engraving. This is called a graver. The guy holding the graver is called an engraver. Okay, so that's just terminology. So every time I refer to a graver or a graving chisel or something like that, I'm talking about the tool itself versus, you know, the act of engraving something, right? So just as a quick technical jargon FYI for anybody who's wondering, I didn't know that either. So I was like I'm like, I'm looking for an engraver. It's like, no, that's a graver, not an engraver. Who knew?
Coffee's Forge says, will I be seeing you and Roy at the grounds this year, Jess? Barbecue Saturday, like always.
Well, he asked you.
Oh, okay. I thought
he said Jess.
Oh, yeah, I guess it was
right?
directed at me. Yeah. Just waiting for you to answer. Yeah, we plan on stopping by sometime. Don't know just yet exactly when it'll be, but yeah, we'll definitely stop by. Keith French, good evening.
Hello, hello.
Jeff Woodring says that finish will be outstanding.
No, thank you. Let's hope it will be. Let's hope it will be. So the goal with this is to hopefully have this in the Quad State Gallery at Quad State this year. So we'll see how far along we get with this to do that. But that's my goal. I'm hoping to have it finished. Beautiful hammer handle installed with it. There's something special with that we're going to be doing. Of course, that'll just be a surprise. There's a real special hammer handle we're going to be putting in this. And hopefully everything will come together and look marvelously.
Gordon Farmer says he's learning amateur radio and welding online.
Huh, cool.
Techromatic, good evening.
Techron, hello, hello.
For the Honor Forge says, me thinks I need to up my prices on ironwork.
Really? Why is that?
Because you're talking about the $3,000 to $4,000 hammer.
Well, that could be an interesting topic. So the interesting thing about upping prices on ironwork, right? There's definitely a point where you're underselling yourself. And most blacksmiths, to be honest, unless they're complete narcissists, are completely underselling themselves for the most part. Usually we are our own worst critics. So we'll look at stuff and we will see every single problem known to man with this item. You guys look at this, and depending on what skill level you're at, depending on how much engraving you personally have done yourself, right? We can go camera number 2. I mean 1. Depending on what type of, depending on what level you're at, right, in the craft, this may look excellent or this may look terrible to you. And so, you know, the price range might range for you quite a bit. So when we're talking about raising your prices or you know, getting paid what you're worth, again, I'm my own worst critic. I'll look at this thing and I'd be like, I don't know. Maybe somebody give me a couple $100 for it because I see all the negatives about it, right? But if I actually calculate what it is and how much time there's into it, how much I get paid as an hourly rate for the shop, things like that, the price goes through the roof. Now, I'm not getting paid no $4,000 to make this hammer, and I'm not going to repeat the price I am getting paid for it, but it's sub $1,000. Let's just say that, right? It's definitely sub $1,000. I don't want to say the price because, well, I don't blab my clients' prices around. But like again, this is like, it's a pet project. It's just something I wanted to do. I wanted to experiment with this, and I had a client that said, "Sure, why not? I can wait forever for you to experiment with it." So that's what I've done right on this. Now, if I were to try to be making something like this and I put a price tag of $4 grand, I guarantee you I could find somebody eventually, might take a decade, but I'd eventually find somebody who'd probably pay the $4 grand for it. Because balance that out, how many people on the market are making hammers of this level? There's not that many, right? And they're going to want high prices too because they know exactly how many hours and craziness that gets in there. So it's a double-edged sword. You raise your prices, that is then indicating that your work is worth more. And so therefore you have now elevated yourself to a point where you have got to maintain a much higher standard. And it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost because where this thing might take me 6 months to a year to make for that $4 grand, you could make, you know, 2 dozen hammers for, say, $300, right? Mm-hmm. And end up making more than you, you know what I mean? End up making more than you did with the one hammer, right? But in order to get the $4 grand out of the one singular item, it has to be the very best that you can produce, right? The very best that you can produce at your current stage of wherever you're at. And so it's a nasty double-edged sword, that is, raising prices and, trying to find your way of, what the market will bear in your area, But it's up to every smith to figure that out for themselves. I mean, I've seen people sell simple bottle openers for $60, and other people couldn't get $5 for them at a fair somewhere. It's just their area, it's what their local market will bear, and, it's just how it works, right? There's some people who can afford buying a custom-made hammer, and then there's people who can't. A Harbor Freight hammer works just fine. Like, you just go out and buy a 3-pound crosspeen. That's what I started with, right? Like, you don't have to have a very expensive hammer to do work with. And yeah, they'll last you forever. I'm looking at one right here on my rack. That was my very first hammer in blacksmithing, and it's still sitting over there on my rack. It doesn't get used very often these days, but it's still there, and it's still got a big whopping China stamped right on the top of it, right? And so yeah, so again, at that time, I would have thought somebody charging even $400 for a hammer would be insane, right? I'm like, back in the day, you were on cloud 9 if you were going to be making $400 on any item. When I first got started in it, and I was listening to the professional blacksmiths that I had surrounded myself with, I mean, they were selling hammers for, $75. $100 and a quarter was like out of this world. I heard some old codger guys at Quad State once be like, I can't believe these young whippersnappers wanting $100 and a quarter a hammer. What's this world coming to? And now get a custom hammer. Custom hammer will cost you, $300-400 in general. I think there's only a few guys out there that are producing hammers for other people under, say, like $200, sub $200 range. So, just something to keep in mind there. It's funny how that works, but everybody has to work that out for themselves and what the market will bear.
Mountain Home Forge says location, location, location.
Yep. I'd like to say internet, internet, internet. Try to get yourself out there, put yourself out there, and go from there.
Ouroboros Armory says just taught a class and gave the students a 2-pound Harbor Freight hammer that I finished the faces to be a rounding hammer.
Yep, that works perfect. Blacksmithing doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be super expensive. Good tools will cost you money, just like anything else in life. And then there's that little known thing that a lot of people are aware of out there. It's called the law of diminishing returns. You do reach a certain point where the latest, ooeyest, gooeyest gadget is, well, yeah, it may be fancy, but it doesn't actually help you any. It's got a few extra little bells and whistles for a higher price. But you could have got the same thing, worked just as efficiently with something at a lower cost. All right, I think I can start leveling out my background now with some planish work. So I'm going to switch to using a small little planishing tool. Man, these are so small. I forget how small these are, like even in the camera. So this is a oval planisher. It's a little small rectangular planishing tool. Hopefully you can see that somewhat. Does my fingers help it?
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, it's shiny enough.
Okay.
It's viewable.
So it's a little tiny planishing tool. And I'm going to use this first and foremost to get in here to all these little tight areas. What this is doing is this is knocking down my backdrop. So anywhere that I've made a bunch of cut lines, like think of them like little cornrows beside one another, I'm hammering those down to where they're all in plane, or planishing them. So since I can't get my hammer in there, I'm using this as my hammer face, or like the peen of a hammer, right? Just by holding it and moving it. And if I slightly hold up off of the material, it'll literally act like a little hammer blow. But this is really helpful to push and planish the backdrop down before scraping. Now I'm probably going to leave the background as scraped versus which I'm going to take it up to a higher degree of finish when I'm scraping the background. Over here's been scraped already, and I'm thinking about leaving it at that kind of level of finish versus coming in and stimpling. Now I could come in with a small stipple texture tool, very similar to this, it's just a little sharper, and I could come in and beat a bunch of little tiny texture marks all over this surface to help disguise the background. That's really what you're doing when you're planishing the background down and smoothing out your backdrop. You're giving the illusion of a smooth background. It's very difficult. You're not going to get this like mirror finish smooth down in here unless you've just got untold quantities of time to do so. Any questions, Jess?
For the Honor Forge says, planishing is like tooling and leatherwork.
Is it?
Yeah, sounds like it is.
Very similar.
Frank Strock says he used to have a t-shirt years ago that said all tools are a hammer except for a screwdriver, because that's a chisel.
You're a goofball, Frank. Love you, brother.
Coffee's Forge says, I love and use all my handmade hammers. LOL, some more than others. Some a little more.
Yeah, you'll find that. Over time, you'll gravitate to certain hammers, you know. They really make you tick, you know. You'll find certain ones that you're just like, oh man, this is my jam, you know.
For the Honor Forge says, I've been working on and off a bearded axe/hammer for a client, but I've hit some frustrating points on it. I like making cool things, but the amount of time on this is unsustainable.
Say that one more time. I didn't hear that whole thing. You trailed off at the end,
I've been
babe.
working on and off a bearded axe/hammer for a client, but I've hit some frustrating points on it. I like making cool things, but the amount of time on this is unsustainable.
Yeah, you'll find that to happen sometimes to you. You know, if you have a very patient client and they don't care about it, you know, let it go. Sometimes you have, sometimes you have to kind of step back and reevaluate how much time you're putting into something. And when I say how much time, I'm not talking physical time, I'm talking mental time. How much effort does it take you to get out of bed in the morning and think about that project? Do you go, ugh, I got to go work on that today? If that's the point that you've gotten, you need to reassess where you're at on it. And maybe you're trying to do too much, or you might have oversold. And when that happens, you just have to be honest with your client where you're at. That's the best thing you can do.
Mountain Home Forge says, didn't Roy just make a hammer punch and stripper plate for the fly press?
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Yes, I did. You can go watch it.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there. In fact, a whole lot of people haven't watched the stripper plate video. They probably figured there was no value in it for them because they don't have a fly press, but did some punching and drifting. It's part of an entire series. I'm working up to quite a few things in that series. So pays to watch those sort of things. I'll just say that.
Gary Brown says he just bought a 2-pound engineering hammer at the flea market for $2 and $3 and just dressed one side and made the other side into a rounding hammer.
Well, good. So there's a ton of people out there that believe a rounding hammer is the quintessential best hammer there is alive out there for every blacksmith. And I really like to encourage people to try a bunch of different styles of hammers. The rounding hammer is not the only thing that there is to actually be had, and in a lot of times, a lot of cases, it's not the handiest. It's not actually even the handiest form of hammer to have in your hand. So it's good to have a range of hammers. Have light hammers, have heavy hammers, have a range of different hammers that you can pick from and work from. Like, you're not going to be doing this kind of work with a 6-pound rounding hammer. This is the type of work where you have to use a little lightweight hammer. This isn't round, it's just square faces. Doesn't need to be round. Doesn't need any curvatures to it, right? Mm-hmm. When I break out a heavier hammer, I use this little hammer, this little cross beam that I forged. I need a little extra oomph behind something or do some forging on stuff. I've got even tinier hammers from there. It all depends on what type of force I'm trying to put into the piece and what I'm trying to accomplish at that particular juncture.
Jeff Woodring says, instead of planishing, could you scrape it level?
Say that again.
Instead of planishing, could you scrape it level?
So scraping comes after the planishing. And the reason why the scraping is going to come after the planishing is because the planishing helps. So on this piece, I don't know if they can see it close enough. There is a lot of I'm not a great engraver. So there's a lot of unevenness in height. So there's some deeper grooves, there's some taller marks, right, that are going all the way across the surface, right? And with that, we can go to camera number 1 real quick while I'm explaining this. So with that, there's differencing, so there's some deep grooves in there. When you plant, you're not going to be able to scrape that out without grinding everything down to the same plane. So it helps to push those closed. Again, this is decorative, right? This is very surface level, very superficial surface level stuff we're dealing with here. In order to planish those levels down, again, you've got some mountain peaks and you've got some valleys. If you knock down those mountain peaks to fill out the valleys first, you have a lot less scraping to do. So that's what I'm doing with planishing the background. Now, another thing that the planishing of the background does for me is it gives me the opportunity to work right up against the piece that I'm going to be basically forming later on, and it allows me to kind of get right up in there and kind of push some material back into that design versus it always being removed away. When I go to actually doing all the shaping of the individual lobes of these acanthus leaf scrolls on the actual project, it's going to be important that I have as much material there as possible, even a little excess pushed up from the edges of the design. The design has got to get the edges kind of pushed up, so this way when I planish it back down, it'll kind of like lay back down, if you will, and it'll give the impression of it just sitting on the surface, because it'll have a tiny bit of undercut to it, which will give it a really harsh shadow line and really make it pop. Great question.
Rob Huff says, I use a 12-pound sledge for all my chasing work. I don't know what Roy's going on about. Smiley face. And Coffee's Forge says, depends on who you're chasing, Rob.
Yeah. Well, you all need, if you don't know Rob Huff, you need to go know that man. The man, the myth, the legend.
Mr. Coffee says he's up to 20 or 22 handmade hammers. He has a problem. Don't judge. LOL. He likes to support makers. It's quite the collection.
Well, from a maker's point of view, that's a good problem for you to have.
You're a collector. It's not a problem.
Yeah, you're a collector. It's not a problem. Some women collect shoes. Some men collect, you know, rifles and such. Some people collect Beanie Babies. You just collect hand-forged hammers. Why not? I need to take a break for a second.
Sure. Robert Lannis is curious if you have a video on this technique.
Yeah, I have tons of videos on these, don't I? Yep, I've got tons of videos on different chasing techniques and some engraving. I've got videos on making the gravers, cape chisels, all the different stuff, all the different chasing tools. Made them way back when, so there's some playlists. So I would go to the channel headline, the channel header, Christ Center and Ironworks, and then type in the subject matter, like engraving chisels, right? Forging, engraving chisels, or whatever the subject matter is, and it should pop up a playlist on the series for you. So you should be able to search the channel for that sort of stuff and do okay. I'm going to shift this so I can rotate my work a bit so I can see it a little bit better.
Stephen from For the Honor Forge says, my clients on ironwork are often very patient. I did oversell a bit because of other work from my other career. Came up keeping me from the workshop. Leatherwork is easier to travel with.
Yeah. And that happens from time to time, you know. Just keep it honest with your clients, and then remember, that's the important thing. Remember what's got you into the debacle in the first place. That's my hard thing. I'll be like, oh man, I'm never doing that again. Woo-hoo-hoo. Roy learned his lesson on that one. And then sure enough, I'll end up getting myself in trouble yet again. And even sometimes Jessica will be like, Roy, honey, don't you remember last time you did this exact thing? I'm like, oh, pish posh. It'll work out fine. I'm like, because I'm so much better now. No, I'm not so much better. I'm that same cocky individual that should have listened to the wife in the first place. Last time.
Bill Wool is curious if you have blue tape around your wedding band or if it's a unique material.
It's a silicone wedding band. Bill?
Protect his fingers if they get stuck in a machine.
Yep.
Insanity Forge says, I'm eventually going to learn to do chasing and engraving.
It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I've got a good amount of videos on it. If you ever want to just take a perusing on it. And, you know, it's not like most of my videos. The majority of my videos aren't going to be the type that are going to be like, hey, you can be just like me. Go out and buy $7,000 worth of tools first. Right? Mm-hmm. The majority of my videos are really approached for beginners and people who ain't got a lot of excess cash, right? Because guess what? Surprise, surprise, I don't. Right? So
Stephen, take care.
Thanks for stopping by, Stephen.
Metal Blueberry says, evening everybody. Sorry I have to run. I had an accident and I'm still working, so everybody stay safe and forge on.
Be careful out there, Metal Blueberries. Thank you for stopping by. Hope everything's okay.
Frank Strock says, I have several hammers in different styles. Swedish, Czech, German, soft, wooden, rawhide, and rounding. You're right, there is no one fits all hammer.
Nope. I guess it just depends on the scope of your work too, a little bit, you know? If all you're ever going to do is forge, you know, knives, let's say, right? Say if that's all you're ever going to forge. Well, there's not a whole lot going on with a knife, so you could probably get by with a rounding hammer 100% of the time. Heck, even without a rounding hammer, just like a regular, just a plain hammer, store-bought, you could get by for the rest of your life probably with in that scenario. As soon as you start getting into forging guards though, right, or forging out your pommels or other stuff, that where you might have to get in and get into some curvatures and hammer on some different stuff, you're going to find real quick that there is no such thing as a universal hammer that just does it all. It's not a thing. Tools are tools, right? And so that's something to just keep in mind. There is no universal hammer here. You can't go like, oh, well, cross peen's the only hammer you'll ever need. Nope. Or this one particular style of cross peen's the only style of cross peen you will ever need. Nope. It all depends on how elaborate your work's going to be in the long run.
Robert Whitney says, finally got a Friday home to watch your live stream or just listen while getting ready for the company on Monday.
Awesome. Glad to have you here, Robert. Thanks for spending the evening with us. Thank you, everyone, for spending the evening with us. I know this is riveting content. Just absolutely amazing.
Jeff Killian wants to know if you're going to engrave your touch mark somewhere on the design.
I don't know. I haven't decided yet whether I want to put my touch mark on it, engrave it somewhere on the design or not. I may actually touch mark it on the interior. That way it's hidden by the handle, and you know, it can be seen if the hammerheads are ever taken off, but it doesn't detract from the design. But we'll see. We'll see.
Rob Huff says, yeah, those house bros get by with cheap $8 hammers and vice grips. Beautiful work.
Yep.
Jeff Woodring says, riveting maybe, but I'm learning a lot. Henry St. Forge, good evening.
Hello, Henry.
Rusty Hubcap says, well, this is cool. Hi, Roy.
Hey, Rusty Hubcap. Good to see you. Good to see you. Guess what I'm working on? Guess.
Brian Neely says, riveting. I haven't seen any rivets. Justin Ray says, it's as riveting as the hand lap sanding I'm doing while watching. Wink.
See, this is the boring stuff that always gets cut out of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody ever gives any thoughts about. But this is all the boring stuff that gets cut out of YouTube. When you see some guy on there making some really ornate whatever, and they do it in 12 minutes, and you leave your comment in 8 minutes, how you would have done it differently, you're missing the 60 plus hours that's actually in that project. That's why usually what works better for YouTube is simple projects or base level stuff.
Jeff Kellyan says the handle will never be replaced because it will never be swung.
Well, we'll never know. I wouldn't want to swing it once it's done. Again, it's more of a statement piece. But it should be fully functional when I get it done, so. Because it is a hammer after all. All right. Now time to break into some scraping. Break out my little scrapers there. We'll take a break real quick. Step up from there and I can answer some more questions. Keep talking.
Okay. Morgan Friend says, I'm late to this party. What are you making?
A very ornate hammer.
Harold Hoshkison says, I made it. Got an hour off from the 50th wedding anniversary celebration.
Oh, no. Well, thank you, Harold. Sorry, Harold's wife. I feel so bad for all the wives at homes that they're, you know, or even husbands at home, the significant others when their lover is here watching someone online during their anniversary. So, but glad to have you here nonetheless.
Rusty Hubcap says, you're right, Jeff, I won't use it. It'll be a wall hanger with a spotlight. You know, you could just like get rid of your coffee table and put one of those acrylic boxes there.
Yeah.
Be like a fancy museum case.
Well, I'm blessed to have somebody who values the work so much. It's very appreciative. I'm very appreciative of that. It's funny. Don't take this as a brag. I don't want it to be a brag. It's just it's a fact. Probably the 6,000 to 7,000 pieces I've created in my career as a blacksmith so far. How many of those went on to make any sort of real lasting impact with any of the clients? How many of those will ever get remembered? I don't know. You know what I mean? How many of those are really that appreciative, right? A lot of the work I've done in the past have all been for like anniversaries and like things like that. And that type of stuff, it's like, okay, hey, this is cool. This fits our decor right now. All right, we'll go put it in a box up in the attic, right? The kids find it years later, you know what I mean? And they're like, well, you want it? Well, I don't know. Is it worth anything? They'll go up on eBay and it's like worth 12 cents and then they just chuck it, right? Again, you know what I mean? So I don't know how much of that has lasting impact. But on certain things like this, and I know the person is going to immortalize it on their wall. So it's nice to know that at least one piece of my ironwork might have some chance of not just going directly to the scrapyard with the second generation that gets to see about it. All right, go to camera number 2.
All right.
Okay, so this is my scraper. I made this out of a snapped file. So this is a snapped needle file. In fact, you can use that nice sharp edge that comes from snapping a file and use that as a scraping tool as well. Really, a scraper is just nothing more than something with an edge that can slowly kind of think of it as like a plane, a little small hand plane you're working with to help smooth off all your little lumpy bumpies and, you know, homogenize the surface of material. I'm going to use, you know, a little bit of pressure here, and I'm just going to use this in a vigorous back and forth action, going lengthwise, and then I'll go cross grain to this and then back lengthwise.
So it'll be like a cross hatch almost?
Kinda. You won't see the cross hatching. Oh. It'll probably be there. And this is going to get rid of the smaller scratches that the planishing can't get rid of without like sanding this, if you will.
How will you know when to stop scraping?
When it looks good. When you don't see any of them little scratches anymore. And you just see the scrapings.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Matej Pros says, great idea about the touch mark. I like having it there and not impacting the client too much. Smiley face.
Yeah. So generally when you do touch marks, this is my thoughts on touch marks anyhow. Touch marks only work one or two ways, okay? And that's it, and it's only one or two ways. You either own it, okay, or you disown it. So that touch mark is either prominent, proud, front and center, it's in a very conspicuous location, or it is hidden, gone, on an edge, somewhere very inconspicuous on that. There's no two ways about it. You have got to make sure that it's one or the other. Otherwise, it looks weird. If I go through all this trouble and then I just put a touch mark right on the face of the hammer,
that would be terrible.
It's just going to be terrible. It's going to look stupid. It's going to be bad, right? Or if I come along here and just right in the middle of one of my designs, I'm just like, bam, big stamp touch mark right there. It's going to look terrible. It's not incorporated in the design, right? And again, that's not how you want to do it. So in this particular case, I want it to be in an inconspicuous location if I touch mark it. If this was in a different situation, I would make it in a conspicuous location, but it would be incorporated in the design somehow that it looks natural and it wasn't like, oh shoot, I forgot my touch mark. Bing, there, that'll work, right? You don't want to do that.
Jeff Killian has a suggestion. He says, just a thought, make a branding iron of your touch mark and brand the handle.
Yep, could do that.
Jeff Woodring says, how do you maintain your back after a day of engraving?
Lots of painkillers and sleep.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've got much of a better idea than that. I take frequent breaks. It's important to do this in stages, right? So you don't want to go too far, too quick, all at once. So you just want to do enough to make some progress, then stop, get a drink, right? Work on something else, look up around, right? Doodle, check Facebook. Better yet, don't check Facebook, delete Facebook. Right?
Clean the shop.
You know, clean the shop.
Clean up all your clinkers on the ground.
Right? Do something else for a little bit and then come back. Let your muscles kind of have that little repair time and then keep coming back to it. It's when we get locked up and we stay in one position too long, that's when our bodies really suffer.
Harold Hotchkiss says, just say the magic words, yes, dear.
Yes, dear. Yes, dear.
Wayne Hines, good evening.
Hey, Wayne. Good to have you here.
Yeah, Rusty Hubcap Forge said butt end of the hammer handle. Yeah, that could be a good spot.
Yep. Again, as long as it doesn't detract from the piece, that's the main goal. I'm running into an area here that's not going to scrape down. There's a bit of a height difference from where I engraved it a little deeper here versus here. So I'm going to have to take a little bit off and then re-scrape that area, which is okay. That's what we're doing this for at this stage.
Pure Hearts Homestead says Dr. Ho makes an awesome back brace.
Keep that in mind.
Black Collar, good evening.
Black Collar Ironworks, hello, hello. So you guys hopefully can see the difference just in the time that we've been messing with this. How much difference there is in this hammer. The surface of it being all chopped up with the engraving to planishing to scraping. Hopefully that's somewhat apparent.
Yeah, it's been an hour and 10 minutes so far.
Ooh-wee. So like I said, I'm going to have about between 26 and 30 hours per side by the time it's all said and done.
Robert Whitney says scraping. I have had a little experience with it many years ago when I worked on building automated machines for the auto industry.
You probably know more about it than me.
Rusty Hubcap says Uncle Buck says hi, Roy and Jess.
Hey, Steve.
Jeff Woodring says when scraping, why do you use the angle you are exhibiting as opposed to a more vertical approach?
Because I'm using, there's a tiny bevel on the end of this. There's a very tiny bevel on the end of this piece. I can't really show it. It's
too tiny.
It's too tiny for that. So I'm taking advantage of the fact of this being a file and just putting the bevel that I want on it. I find I have more control this way. I get what you're saying, pulling it this way, right? Doing your scraping that way. You know, or draw filing like people do this way, like a scraper, like in this direction. This is just a country hack. I don't know what to call it. It's not probably the best way in the way. This just seems to be in good control, just the way that I shaped this one. So no real rhyme or reason. I can't give you an intelligent response on that one. There's better ways and there's proper scrapers out there. But this is really removing, with the little tiny chamfer I've got on the end of it, this is really removing a lot of material pretty quick and smoothing up this surface. Really, really good. So it's working as of right now.
Speargrass Forge says good morning.
Good morning, Speargrass. Adam?
How's winter treating you down under?
Yeah, can you send it this way, please?
Dan's Creations and Adventures says, Roy, I'm a bit of a perfectionist and hate leaving things that I feel are flaws where I might be the only one to ever notice. At what point do you consider your piece perfect to you and completed?
Never. It's never completed. It's never perfect. So let's take a break and I'll expand upon that. So that's a great question, and I'd like to expand upon it for just a second. You have to get rid of the idea of perfect. Perfect's not out there. Now, in absence of perfect not existing, that doesn't mean imperfect is just great, right? Sloppy ironwork or shoddy work is amazing. No, that's not what I'm saying. You have to get rid of this pursuit in your own mind that everything has got to be immaculate, everything's have to be perfect, it dress right, dress, the most gorgeous, the most top end of everything you could ever put. You've got to put your entire soul into every single last ounce and fiber of your being into that piece that you're working on. Taking it to that extreme, you never get anything done. You never get anything accomplished. And since you don't ever get anything accomplished, it puts you into a negative feedback loop of failure, right? And with that, that's demoralizing, and basically you kick your own butt, right? Like a can down the road. It's just a revolving door in that. So you have got to get a win in there somewhere. So even though you don't feel like it's completed yet, because I have a perfectionist in me as well, right? I'm like, ugh, God, ugh, man, I've got that, and I need that, and I need to kind of do it a little bit better, and there's some height changes along there. It's like I've got between now and quad state to put 100 hours in. If someone wants to pick this hammer up and look at it this close and say, I could have done better, they are more than welcome to try, right? That's not going to be the reaction. I'm giving it my best, the best that I can do right now with the time that's allotted and that I've been able to clear out my schedule to make this thing happen. And because of that effort, it's going to look amazing when it's done. It's going to be an amazing looking hammer. Somebody might not just take it down to the scrapyard and chuck it someday. It'll be a really good looking piece when I get done. Will it be perfect? Absolutely not. Will an actual, like, you know, engraver look at this and be like amazed at my God-given talents? No, they won't. They'll be like, that is hideous. But to the 1,200-aught blacksmiths who are not engravers, I imagine they're going to say, whoa, that looks pretty cool. And go on and look at some knives and look at whatever else, right? And go grab themselves a, you know, spicy bean burrito outside at the gut truck. So you have to put that in your mind. You have to get out of your own way, so to speak. You have to get out of your own way. You have to stop being a critic of your own work. And that's the hardest part. So it's more of a mental game than it is anything else. So there's not any advice that I can give you beyond that. You've got to step up out of your own way. Realize that you probably suck as a smith. I suck as a smith. We all suck as smiths. We are all just learning, and we're trying to enjoy the process as we go along until we punch our ticket out of here, right, someday. And once you can do that, then you can start letting go of things and, you know, realizing that done is better than perfect.
Pure Hearts Homestead says, I like the word excellence instead of perfection.
Yeah. You should strive to do your best with the time that's allotted. I look at stuff sometimes, and I have for a lot of years. I've seen stuff like in the Quad State Gallery. So I've been a SOFA member now 13 years.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
12 years?
12.
12.
Yeah.
12. So I've been a member of SOFA for 12 years. I've been going to SOFA's Quad States for a decade, so 10 years. Okay, I didn't go to the first two. So I've been going to Quad States for 10 years, right? And out of that, I've only ever exhibited any of my work that I've ever done twice there at their gallery. And why? Well, frankly, it's just because there's people who do this for a hobby, and there's people who do this for a living. People who do this for a living generally don't have time to make passion projects to go put into the gallery. They're too busy working on finishing customers' orders so they can get to Quad State to have a good time and enjoy themselves. And then there's people who do it as a hobby, and they've got all year long to kind of work on the most masterfully beautiful thing that they can put their time to, as where I maybe have 3 days to make up something to throw in the gallery, right? And so I did that once, and I was kind of like, this isn't my best work. This is just me trying to throw something in the gallery, right? And so I kind of quit doing it, quit adding my work to the gallery, because for whatever reason, it always seemed like the week of quad state, I would get slammed with orders, or a big custom project would come through, and I am slamming to try to get it out, work until midnight, 1 a.m. every day, trying to get through the job, and just be exhausted by the time I hit quad state. And where was my best ironwork? Oh, it's at the client's house. It's been shipped. I was like, well, I got pictures, but that doesn't do anything for you. So this year is like really the first year that I will be exhibiting several things at the gallery, which I'm super excited about, because I have had, I wouldn't say time, I've made time to work on things that I'm particularly proud of. So, yeah.
Rob Huff says, will that hammer be one of those items?
Yes, it will, Rob. Hopefully. I hope. I was just about to do a bad thing. I was literally just picking up a hammer.
Yes.
I was going to hit my scraper with it. What are you doing,
would
Roy?
Not be good. Thomas, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Roy and Jess.
Hey, Thomas. Thank you, buddy.
And followed up with another $2 super chat. Did my other super chat go through? It did. That's one way of checking, though.
Thank you, Thomas. Greatly appreciate the support, brother.
Bar Run Forge says he has to head out.
Troy, thanks for being here, buddy. Take care.
Speargrass says, just like with people, slight imperfections give it character and personality. It makes things interesting. Generic is boring.
Exactly. Again, you can take that too far. I've heard people say that they're, hammer whisperers, they're steel whisperers. They want to find out what the steel wants to be, and that's all garbage. I can tell you that right now. Like, well, I'm going to let the steel tell me what it wants to be, and it's going to flow in whatever direction it wants to go, and if it wants to be a flower pot, it'll be a flower pot. That's all nonsense. So, you could take that too far. You can say, oh, well, I left in all those missed hammer blows because, well, that's texture. That's considered rustic ironwork. No, it's just considered garbage ironwork that you're passing off as rustic. Let's be honest. And why do I know this? Because I have done it too. I have been there, done that. Right? I've covered up some faults of my forging with saying, oh, well, that's rustic. That's meant to be that way. I meant to have those hammer marks there.
Robert Whitney says a scraper is like a one-flute file. The angle of the tool controls the depth of the cut.
Yep.
Dan's Creation says, Jessica, thanks for asking. Roy, I appreciate the answer. My dad keeps telling me something looks good and nobody will notice, and then I keep noticing and it drives me crazy. But you're right, I should get out of my own way.
Exactly. You have got to give yourself space to learn and breathe. You have to breathe a little, man. You gotta get out of your own way. Give yourself some space to grow as a blacksmith, as an artist.
There's plenty of times where Roy's like, he asked me, he's like, Jess, I want you to look at this because, I see problems with this and I think the customer is going to notice it. So what, you need to give me your opinion. And I'll look at it, I'm like, no, this is perfectly acceptable. Like, there's nothing that's like a glaring issue with this. And, it's just his attention to detail that it was like very obvious to him. So yeah, sometimes having some extra pairs of eyes on it can help.
Yep, it certainly can.
Rusty Hubcap says, have you enjoyed the challenge on this hammer build, Roy?
Enjoyed is such a strong word. Yeah, no, I've enjoyed the challenge for sure. If I didn't, we wouldn't be doing it. Oh, I've been enjoying the process. There are things that could make my life a lot easier. Again, all of this background has been removed with just a hammer and chisel. Just as old-fashioned as you can go. What I wouldn't give for a good GRS palm graver for this project. This is just one side. There's 3 others to go. So halfway through my 8-hour day of working on this today, I was kind of like, what did I get myself into? I love how it's coming out. Don't get me wrong. I'm loving that part. It's just the the intensity and the enormity of the situation. Like, oh, I want to get this done by quad. Well, it's like, I better hurry up and get on this. A lot of times things like this, they work out my brain like, oh, well, this shouldn't take that long. I told Jess on this, I'm like, yeah, maybe I can have this hammer finished up this weekend.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
I think you said that on Wednesday.
Yeah, I said that on Wednesday. Like, yeah, I'm getting started on this one. I said I should be able to maybe get this hammer finished up and get it all tooled out by Wednesday or by the weekend. Be ready to go. And then I got into it for the last day and a half, and I was like, yeah, nah, that's not going to happen. I'm like, that's not happening. Let's just be honest. I'll probably spend most of next week working on this specifically. Getting it to my degree of perfect or completed. But yeah, it's been a very enjoyable experience, I would say.
Stuff like this we do, we do a good photo shoot of it before it leaves the shop, and some videos sometimes. We need to get better about doing that, like a couple of video clips, glory shots of it, but
yep.
To document.
This is by far the nicest hammer I've ever made, though. I will say that.
Mm-hmm. Tony D says, found y'all a couple of days ago and became a fan instantly. Happy to see your profession of faith. Praise the Lord and bless you both.
Thank you. Bless you too. Glad to have you a part of the channel.
Heath French says, I got onto Instagram and the hammer was the first thing I saw, and you've done a really good job. It has come a long way.
It has, ain't it?
Dogbone Nice, hello.
Little stubborn overlap there.
Dana, have a good evening.
Dana, thanks for coming, pal. I hope you're doing okay.
Stephen Olson says, good day from Australia. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Much appreciated and love watching.
Very welcome. Thank you for watching, and hello all the way from northern Michigan.
Go ahead.
I found some weird double cut line there.
Oh yeah.
As I was attempting to scrape that out. It's weird.
Dan's Creation says, have you slipped and caused any damage to this engraving that you've had to let go of and move on?
Into this one?
Yes.
Have I slipped?
Yeah.
Nope. The time for that will be 56 hours from now. That'll be the true testament. I'll have most of all the background will be removed, and I'll be doing all my shaping then.
Jamie, hi.
Jamie from Goshen?
Yeah.
Jamie Geyer.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know Jamie, you should. If you're ever in Ohio, runs a great blacksmithing school down in Goshen, Ohio. Give him a little shout out. that school in which of conversation currently, I'll be actually doing a garden bench class at in October, if you're interested in. He's your man to get in contact with, huh, hon?
That's correct.
Got that little demo screen pulled up, I imagine?
Sure did.
Yeah? You're on it, ain't you?
I am.
You know how to do it. Ooh.
DK Ironworks, hello.
Hello, DK.
Walt Burkhart says, you're the Bob Ross of metal, LOL.
Just a happy little scroll. Happy little scroll over there. Bob Ross of metal, huh? Hopefully that blowing's not getting into the camera.
Tony D says, really loving the rustic look of the shop. Did you put the building up?
No. Nope, this building came pre-assembled 70 years ago. And the wood on it's older than that, but it was built in this location about 70 years ago.
David Payne says, amen, brother, on the metal whisperers.
It's going to be, it's just going to be a crane. Nope, nope, look, it's a dinner fork. Nope, it's a spork. It definitely wanted to be a spork the whole time. No, it didn't. You just didn't know where you were going with it. And didn't know how to get there.
DK Ironworks says, etching is on the top of my learning list.
Yeah, engraving or etching?
Etching.
Etching, yeah. Well, there's
Alan?
plenty of tutorials out there.
Take care, Alan.
Who's going?
Alan, hubcap.
Hubcap, take it easy, brother.
Bortikov, hello. Doe Creek Forge sent a $5 super chat and said, would like to know more about the tools you are using.
Okay, I can do that. So this is just a file that I've snapped by accident. It's a needle file that I snapped by accident, and I've just turned into a scraper to scrape the surfaces clean. I've also got the tip of that file that I ground a tiny little chamfer on the tip here, and I'm using that to get into the tight areas to scrape out all the backdrop on this hammer. So that's what I'm using for that. I also have a small graver that I have made. I forged out this coil spring, hardened and tempered, and ground the graver. This is just a bit of mild steel with a hole popped through it to make a small graver hammer. Yep, and so those are the main tools that I'm using right now. Now earlier I was using chasing tools. I use various different types of tools like you see here. These are all planishing tools for planishing the backdrop. And before that I used all sorts of chasing tools. Something like this. This is a big one. This is way too big for what we're doing here. That had different butcher tools here to actually go around and do the line work and push the backdrop away from the actual design. So that's kind of just a brief summary of the tooling. Hopefully that helps.
DK, I do believe we have a tutorial on how to make the hand gravers.
Yep, I do.
Rob Huff says, context is king too. Keep in mind whose work you might be comparing yours to. Making stuff in class with guys like Roy or Brian Brazil can easily make you think your work is doo-doo. Gotta remind yourself, or myself, I don't have the same experience as these two.
That's a good point, Rob. You know, I have to remind myself in class a lot of times, right? When I'm planning out a class. And in fact, the class this fall is going to be a real interesting one of those times. I have to remind myself, we can go back up to camera number 1 for a minute.
Okay.
While I'm talking, that what I think I can do, or what I know I can do in a certain amount of time, and what I think is easy comes from me having a decade plus of experience in smithing. So, somebody else may not find it that easy, right? And there's a little bit of that disconnect because, well, I don't have anybody here that I'm having to like, here, go do this very complicated thing. And I don't watch them suffer on a regular basis, right? Like, so I'm like, oh, well, you know what? That's a little too, well, I guess that is kind of an advanced technique. No, I just do it without thinking kind of thing. And so doing classes, teaching classes, you have to put that thinking cap on of like, would I have been able to do this with only 3 years in? Right? Would I have been, and then that, and you have to kind of think like, what about if I only had 6 months at this? Well, what about the type of tooling, right? Because I can say, oh, well, it's real easy. You just use this tool and that tool, and you throw it over here and under a power hammer, and then you drift it under the press, and you do. But again, that doesn't necessarily translate to somebody who doesn't have power hammer, doesn't have press, doesn't have tooling. So it does take quite a bit on an instructor's end of thing to simplify the tooling and the techniques down to their base elements where they are approachable by everyone. And that is very difficult to do, let me tell you. And so I'm kind of on the garden bench. I'm going to be real candid with everybody. This is one of those things that it's like, it's either going to go really well for everybody who's involved or it's going to go terrible. And it's just because it's one of those things like I know in my shop, I can make it all day long. That's not a problem. Doing it in another shop and then teaching maybe potentially 10 other students, 10 other guys how to do that maybe only have a year in, 3 years, 5 years, no experience. Teaching them how to do the same things. That's very tricky, right? That's very tricky to do. So I'm shooting for the moon. I'm shooting for the moon on this one. And so hopefully I will have a good amount of fixtures and jigs already all set up. And that, by the time class is ready. And yeah, we'll be able to, I'll be able to make it approachable. The design, originally my design was a lot more elaborate, but I kept kind of simplifying it, revising it, simplifying it, revising it, simplifying it to hopefully make it approachable, right? So for people who want to get into larger scale ironwork in traditional joinery, it's approachable. It's something that they can do. It's a good starting point anyhow. So we'll see how it goes. There's going to be a lot to sweat. Into the oldies and to the newies. And
Not as much as there would have been though.
Oh no, not as much as there would have been if we would have had it in July. That was a good call.
Yes. Jamie says he's looking forward to having you.
Jamie, it's going to be a blast. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. I'll say, yeah, that whole thing of reminding yourself like, hey, this guy's got a lot more experience than me. My work is okay. It doesn't have to be that perfect, or it doesn't have to look exactly like the instructors or whoever you're watching, right? Whoever you enjoy their content that they're putting out, or their instruction, or you're inspired by. It's okay to just say, okay, well, my work's not there yet. That's where I'd like to strive to be. But, give yourself time to grow. Because that person that seems to be oh so awesome, there's no savants in this craft. It's just work. Time at the hammer and anvil. That's it. There's nobody out there that's like, oh, that person is just, heck, they are next worldly when it comes to blacksmithing. And it just comes oh so easy to them. No, you still have to put in the same amount of sweat equity. Your hands have got to learn patience, right? And accuracy. You don't just get gifted that. It's one of the rare crafts that you just can't do. You can't do by seeing, right? You have to experience it in full.
Yep.
Good.
Robert Lannis says, what is the hammer made of?
The hammer is made of 1045. That's my preferred hammer making material, mainly because that's what I've always had on hand.
Bortagov says, I thought you were going to live stream last week. Is there a change in schedule or am I mistaken? There was actually 5 Fridays in the month of July, and we only normally do 2 live streams a month, so it's not every other week, but it's twice a month. So for example, if you look in the description of this live stream, it'll have the next one, the date and the link to it.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of that real quick. Yeah, if you don't see a live stream from us and you haven't gotten any word from us, most likely it's because it's fallen on like a 5th week or something like that. And we only live stream twice a month. So, are we at the first camera? Mm-hmm. We only live stream those twice a month, but it's every other week, right, is the live stream. So, this is the first live stream of, which is crazy to think, August. The second live stream of the month will be a giveaway live stream. We'll be giving away another Holland Anvil Swedge block, and we'll be giving away a bunch of tongs as well, and a bunch of other goodies, a bunch of other tools in that live stream. So be sure to check that one out. But that won't be next week. That'll be the following week, right? So it's not next Friday. It'll be the following Friday after that. So 2 weeks out.
The 20th of August. Black Collar Ironworks sent a $10 super chat. Says,
Who?
wow, nice electric etching work, Roy. Hee hee hee.
Black Collar?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. I do try. I do try. You know, that laser engraver I have sitting in the back really helps out.
Speargrass Forge says, I'm going to let this metal talk to me. It's going to complain the whole time. I'm turning it into what I want it to be.
Yeah, there you go.
Jake Petty says, Roy, what are your thoughts on Damascus ornamental work?
Think it's great. Something besides a knife.
It's a rarity, though.
Oh, so my opinions when it comes down to things like Damascus work, stuff like that. My opinions, I mean, they're solely from a point of interest, right? Self-interest. My interest has never ran with Damascus. That's never been my interest. Neither has knives or knives. Knives have not been my interest. I have made some knives in the past, a long, long time ago. If you can call them knives, they were terrible. They're just ridiculously so, right? And I've done stuff like that in the past, and it just didn't interest me, right? It didn't interest me. I got started in it and things like that. Same thing with Damascus. It's a whole lot of hullabaloo of just making a square chunk of steel that you can turn into something else, just so you can have fancy patterns in it, and then you take insane chances of delaminations happening, and while you work the piece later on down the road. There's a lot of nuances around it that I just never particularly cared for or wanted to get into myself. With that being said, I think Damascus is cool, right? I think it can be very decorative, and I think it can really add or accentuate ironwork that would otherwise be dull, right? Something that maybe doesn't have a lot of form. It's got a flat plane, and it screams for something to happen to it, right? It wants to have something going on there, but you're not quite sure what. Maybe making that flat plate out of some Damascus might be nice, right? That's kind of my thoughts when it comes to Damascus as a whole. I don't particularly enjoy making you know, spending 5 hours, 10 hours, whatever, making a block of steel and then go and then try to turn that into something else. I'd rather just make the thing that I'm trying to get after with an already purchase made piece. The most I've done with that kind of work has been mokume. I've done mokume gane. I've done that type of work before in small batches, small quantities for things. And I really, I mean, I enjoyed that process for the time that I was doing for that project. But would I want to do that daily? No. It's fun to experiment with just a little bit. I did it on one project just because I wanted to experiment with it, and then my interest waned after that. Oh. And you'll see that happen. Oh, we can pull this up and see what we got here so far. Okay.
Just so you know, it's 640, babe.
640, good. Good. Can they see the depth?
Yeah.
Is that in focus? Can they see the depth of that cut now?
Yeah. Yep, that helps.
What's everybody think?
More of an angle. We'll take a moment for that to catch up. Thomas sent a $5 super chat and says, I can come over and suffer.
The suffering. Thank you, Thomas, for the $5 super chat.
Wayne Hines says, Damascus is beautiful and something you can look at closely.
Again, large public work, sculpture, or something's going to be up, you know, 150 foot up in the air. I wouldn't be wasting my time making it out of Damascus. Let's just say that, right? It's a contextual thing, right? Life's all about context.
Henry St. Forge says, amazing. Tony D says, better than Thor's hammer.
I hope it is.
Eric gives you 5 clappy hands.
Thank you, thank you.
Speargrass says, looks spectacular as always, Roy.
So I'm go ahead and I'm just using a block with some 300 grit sandpaper. That's wore out, so it's probably like 600 grit by now. I'm just rubbing these surfaces to get some of these little micro scratches out because I want to see where I need to clean up stuff later on. If I need to do some more chisel work or what I need to do, this will help highlight all my edges because the tops will be shinier than the bottom now that's matted, right? So it'll give me a good idea of what I've got going on here. And I'm hoping this will highlight, and it kind of is, well, I'll see if I can show it off in the camera. This will highlight how doing your planishing work right up next to your design will pick up the design a bit. And you'll see right around the edges of this design, there's a bit of a pooch up. And I'm going to use that to my advantage when I actually go to chasing this whole thing. I'm going to use that little bit of a pooch up to my advantage. Go.
Coffee's Forge says, I made more from hearts made from scrap from a Damascus kniff I made this past Christmas than I did the kniff.
Yeah.
Dohag from Norway says, I like that. I like it a lot.
Cool. How'd you like it? All right.
That almost polishes it.
Yep, it will. It's called hand sanding. Now see, this is the part this is where I start getting kind of excited, right, about my work. This is the part I enjoy about the process. Much. I mean, look at that. Does that look sick or what? Oh
yeah, that does. That looks really nice.
So something I didn't mention, I already took this thing up to a 300 grit finish originally. Before I started laying in all of my line work. This is all done with a chasing chisel. or a butcher, like a butcher tool. Is this in focus? I just feel like that's out of focus somewhat.
From here, it looks in focus.
I think that's better. How's that?
Yeah, that helps.
Did it jump up
Show the other
on
side
your
for
end?
a second. It did. Show the other side real quick before it goes away. There you go. Close up.
Here.
Went away.
So there you guys can see, right? See how it's got a bit of a pooch up to it? See how those got a little bit of a pooch?
Yep.
All right? So that uses to our advantage. But yeah, so I finished this. Again, it's just like a little engraving. This is just a little chasing butcher. A butcher is something that has a single edge and a single plane coming off. This can be pitched all sorts of different pitches, but that's basically the gist of a butcher. And so I use different tinier butchers to butcher in around my designs around the hammer. So as you can see, so this design is almost exactly carbon copy the same as this, but this design is different than the sides, and it's also different than what's on bottom, right? And I just did that to just give more interest. Plus, it's really hard to take and draw all, like this whole thing was drawn on by hand. There was no stencils, no print off. This was just all done by eye. And drawing this on by hand originally with Sharpie and then going around those lines, right? And as you see, I got black here. That's going to indicate how that'll be blackened out on the sides. But you can see the depth of that there. So I got to take all surfaces of this hammer down to that plane, like you see here. Is that cool?
So is that side now done to a stage of completion where you would now start another side normally?
No, I still got way more scraping and planishing work to do down here. It's still too rough in this area. So I've probably got another hour or two of doing scraping and planish work to get that inside where I want it and have the right texture. It's just not worth doing it on the stream.
Yeah, there's only 15 minutes left anyway.
Yeah, but you guys can kind of get the idea. That's what I'm working on. And you know, that'll shine up just like a jewel. You know, this part here, for those of you that are arriving in late, the backdrop will be blued. That'll all be gun blued. And then the whole surface, the parts that you see that are shiny right now that are contrasting with that surface, those will all be polished and shaped and sculpted. So it's going to have a sculpted design on all sides of the hammer, except for the face and the peen, obviously.
Yep, Dan, he was given free rein on the design.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't I would not probably give my customers an option on a hammer like this, just because the piece will dictate kind of what I can do here, right? Like once I got a finished forged piece and it's finished ground down, there's only so much surface area to take and be. But main cam? Something wrong with the secondary cam?
Oh, no, I was just switching for a second.
Okay, so once the piece has been forged, once it's been ground down, and you're getting to the finished work, there's only so much surface area there to be had. So say they wanted, you know, a big cartoon figure, Bugs Bunny eating a carrot while shooting a Roadrunner or something, right? Like, you might be able to portray that, but you might not be able to get what they're wanting on the hammer. So really it's up to an artistic expression of what you want to do there. And this is just, it's too high end of work to let somebody say, oh yeah, I want my initials and I want this and I want my baby's face, you know, carved into the side of it, and I want this and I want some scrolls and how about some more leafage, and because it just doesn't work that way. There's a lot of setup and prep from the way you shape the hammer, how big the surface area you make to do that. Like I had to let in on this hammer a little extra surface area to make it a panel hammer. Right? So this has a little bit of a different odd dimension to it than like what maybe a regular cross peen would have. It's hard to explain. It's not it's not like your normal cross peen shape. It's not the standard cross peen shape, and it's done that way for the design. So I forged it in minds of what I was going to do for the design later, and that all has to kind of come together in the moment, and you really can't spend a ton of time working back and forth with a customer, letting them kind of decide what's going to go on in the moment when it comes to that. If you can, you're a better man than me. Oh, gotta showcase my center vein that'll go through here at some point. Everything good?
Robert Lannis says he made your chasing butcher from your video and uses it constantly.
It's a lot of fun to make those, and they're really simple. It's awesome.
Kennard Christensen says, glad I'm not doing that. I wouldn't be able to use my hands for a week.
It's something you have to work up to. It's definitely not something you jump right in on, that's for sure.
Speargrass Forge says, so is the process graving, harden, temper, then blue?
Yeah, so the process, are we at number 2?
Yep.
We can go at number 1.
Okay.
So the process is basically, yeah, it's exactly that. So you do the decorative work after you anneal everything. So you forge it, you get it forged, you get it ground mostly to shape, not finished ground, but ground mostly to shape. You anneal it, you take it back, you clean up, you take it to the finished grind that's going to be for you to actually do your decorative work. You draw on your decorative work, you do all your chasing work on it, all your engraving, anything that you're doing that way. You can't do inlay before heat treat because, well, inlay would melt out, right? If you're going to do inlay with a piece. But just for what I'm doing here, that's the process. Once you've done all your chasing and your bas relief engraving and done all that good stuff, then you go in for the heat treat on the whole deal. I said earlier that if you have the right tool steel that you've made your gravers from, so like if you used a piece of carbide is what a lot of people make their gravers from. You know, a lot of professional gravers have just a piece of carbide, right? It's a length of carbide with a proper grind on the tip. If you make them from that, then you can engrave and do all this work after you quench the piece, after it's been hardened and tempered. But since this is made from like 5160, it's just a simple spring steel, that won't hold up when hammering against something that's been heat treated. It's not going to hold up. Your gravers are going to dull rapidly. You're going to have a terrible time. It's going to take you probably 3 times as long to engrave and chase and do all this than as if you would have just done it beforehand. Now, with that being said, there's the trade-off though, right? This is the risk factor. Once this is all done, I've got my 100 hours of work into all the engraving and fine chisel stuff and everything else, and I go and I quench this thing and it develops a crack. In the trash bucket it goes. There went 100 hours, gone in 3 seconds, right? So that there's some things you could do to mitigate that, and that's stuff I won't get into. I don't want to make the internet metallurgists mad at me, but there's some things you could do to still come out with a hardened hammer and not end up with cracking by doing a full body quench. But that's beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about here. But yeah, so that's the whole process in a nutshell. The trade-off, like I said, if you can, the great thing would be get it all mostly forged and great, grand, glorious and go dunk the sucker, right? Go get that thing heat treated and then worry about doing all your grinding and your engraving and your stuff elsewhere after that. I will say this, chasing doesn't do well on hardened hammers. So chasing does not do well on hardened hammers. So if you're going to do any chasing work to it, where you're doing a lot of sculpting, you can't do that. You could do engraving, but you can't do any sort of sculpting with the material. You're going to end up causing cracks, because you're working a high carbon tool steel against another high carbon tool steel cold.
Jake says, I have always wondered with your larger jobs, gates and whatnot, did your customers find you or did you market yourself to the customers?
The majority has been they found me. The marketing comes from being out there with other products, other services, online, around your local community, stuff like that. It doesn't take long for people to say, hey, I know that guy, right? Or I know a guy who knows a guy. And once you start getting known like that, you'll start taking on all sorts of work. Or you'll get all sorts of jobs, rather, I should say, that'll come in for you. But it usually requires you to, I don't want to say, you just have to put yourself out there. Get the attention to yourself first, right? So you got to do a lot of marketing, and then later on, the other stuff comes in afterwards. So I just doodled up a sample. Can they see that okay? Mm-hmm. Everything look good?
Yeah.
Is that a good angle for it?
Point it down a fuzz. There you go.
That good?
Yep.
So what I've done here with the black lines is I've just illustrated the chasing work that's still yet to be done. There's going to be some chasing work done to that, and then each one of these lobes, get a little pointer here, each one of these lobes are going to be sculpted. So they're not just going to remain flat. They're actually going to be sculpted. So this one, let's just try to point out this one. This lobe is going to be under, this lobe is going to be over. This lobe is going to be under, that lobe is going to be over. This lobe on the inside is going to be under, this lobe is going to be over. So I've got to come in with a planishing tool and set this front edge of this material down so this way this material sticks up proud. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And it's going to give it like my fingers here, it's going to give it this three-dimensional roll kind of effect as you feel across the piece. So when you actually pick this up, somebody's going to see this across the room and be like, oh, well, that's neat. Some dude engraved a hammer. And then they'll come over and they're like, whoa, wait a second. That's more than just an engraved hammer.
Right,
and then when they come over, they're going to pick this up and they'll be like, wait a minute, is that a separate piece? How did he do that? No, it's all one piece, but it gives the illusion of depth, right? It gives the illusion a lot more pop, like as if it's a separate piece put on here. And so when someone feels this, it'll feel good in the hand. That's where you'll feel all those little bumps and ridges and little ducks and curves and valleys and things like that that I'm going to hammer into this piece. Now, obviously, you can't use a hand hammer and whack on all these little lobes, right? Well, if you can, you are a much better smith by leaps and bounds than I am to do that. So that's where all these little planishing tools, let me grab I'll grab a little teardrop tool. Can they see that? Mm-hmm. That's where little tools like this come in handy. I can come in here and find this lobe and press it down by whack, whack, whack. And this becomes my hammer face.
That one almost still looks too big.
Well, yeah, this one's too big. I've got tinier ones, but they won't be able to see it on camera.
Yeah,
so that's an oval. This is a square oval. See? Even tinier. Mm-hmm. So I can use that as a tiny little hammer to get in there and shape these leaves just like I would in a cantus leaf, to give this shape and form and roll and stuff like that. And when I do that, because there's a sharp edge right here, since there's a sharp edge right here, see? I can literally hit that's why we removed the background. Because of that sharp edge, what's going to happen is as this gets forged out, this is going to expand at a different rate than what the material underneath is, and that will give an undercut to it. So the piece is flat and square right now, like my finger, like this, right? It's flat and square. There's an edge right here. And when you hammer this top surface, while this is being supported, it's going to create an undercut like this. And so when that gets rolled down a little bit, it's going to create a shadow line.
Right.
And so it's going to look visibly, when you look at it, like this piece is just attached onto the surface. It'll look like it's just plopped onto the surface. And people are like, what wizardry is this? Hopefully. That's, if I do my job good enough, that's what it'll look like. But you see there's a big difference already from this, hopefully, with the lines, the way the light's catching the shadows, than there is from this. This is considered just engraving, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done this, I've pushed the background away with chasing chisels, but I could literally just, you know, I could have just went around with an engraver around my design and engraved this, and it would have been that flat, see?
Yeah.
There's no depth.
It's going to make a huge difference.
There's no depth, see? It all looks the same plane. You're like, okay, that's cool. Not the best engraving I've ever seen, right? But then you go to that, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. What's that? That's a different story. So that's the whole purpose of putting in the hours in this piece, to do it like that.
Heath French, does Roy see a dog-like shape in the swirl of the leaf?
Depends which leaf. It's a paw.
It's a paw.
Roar.
Eric says this looks much like leather carving.
I've never leather carved, so maybe it is.
You'd probably be really good at it if the tools are very similar. Like, it's just a lot less.
Well, let's see
force.
here. Let's see here. Leather is softer, right?
It is, yeah.
So
You might like just slice right through it though, like apply too much. Like
there's a good chance that I'd apply way too much energy to it there. Oh, but I mean, it might literally be that way though, huh?
Bortikov says I would normalize it very well before the quench.
Oh yeah. You'd be a fool not to. This thing's picking up a lot of hammer stress. A lot of stress.
Granddad's Forge, hello.
I just like drawing in these lines to get an idea of where I'm going.
Yeah, it really helps a
And
lot.
just make sure that I'm still doing what I'm wanting to do. You know?
Black Collar says Metal Whisperer much, Roy? Hee hee.
Metal Whisper. A little bit, maybe.
He says, I think it needs some painted red flames. It makes the hammer hit harder. To match the chops, eh? Speargrass Forge says it looks like a French crosspeen.
Close.
Maybe a bit French inspired.
Very early. But the actual design, you know, yeah, I'm very inspired by Baroque ironwork, so French Baroque ironwork. So that's kind of the inspiration for this hammer, is, you know, using French styling, acanthus sleeves and design work. I think that looks pretty good, huh?
It does, yeah, it does.
So, oh, I forgot my inside leaves. Da, 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 da. What are you doing, Roy? Are you even human? What are we doing here?
John Portwood says, good evening, Roy and Jess. That's a beautiful hammer. Thanks for sharing, and God bless.
Thank you for being here, and good evening. God bless you. Woo! All right, well, I think that's enough progress for me for one evening on that.
Yep.
If there's any questions or comments, complaints, concerns, we can address those real quick while we're doing, you know, while I'm out here. We'll do that for a little bit, open it up for Q&A for maybe like 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
And then we'll call it a day.
That'll work. DK Ironworks says, pulled up all of your chasing videos. Gonna educate myself lightly this weekend, I think. LOL.
Get into it. It's really not that difficult. You just have to get started, right? It's really not that difficult to get into. Really simple tools, and you can get started on your own thing. So this my gravers, for instance, like this graver I did, it's just a piece of garage door coil spring stretched out. I did a little bit of forging on it. My forging was stretching it out, and then I ground the shape of the graver to tip, and then drilled an undersized hole in this little wooden handle, an old hammer handle that had split, and just drove it on. There you go. Now you got a graver. Same thing, the hammer doesn't have to be anything fancy. The hammer was just a mild steel, just a little chunk of mild steel, 5/8 square, that I punched a round hole in, right? Mm-hmm. And then shaped a hammer handle to go through there and wedged it. Mm-hmm. Real basic, you know. There's nothing to it. It's not like it's got to be, you know, you got to go pick up, you know, $5,000 worth of tooling to get started at. All of the chasing tools you've seen me use in any of those videos, they are all made from coil spring. Almost every last single one of them, actually. Just regular car automotive coil spring. Straightened out, forged out a little bit, and just ground to different shaped tips to suit the purpose, right? To suit my purposes at that time. And I've got several cans of tools. I counted at one time. I've made a bunch since then. At one time, I had 56 individual chasing tools. I've made a bunch more since then, so I don't know what it is. I might probably have 70, maybe 80 actual little tiny little chasing tools, things like that. And yeah, you just make them up for different areas. There's some difficulties I'm finding that I'm going to end up forging some more chasing tools just to get into some of these little areas that I wasn't able to get in very well with my current planishers and stuff. So I'll be doing that tomorrow. You know, making up some more, so it doesn't have to be real difficult to get into it. What else?
He says, what do people think steel would say if it could speak when you're working it? I want to hear your ideas. Like a video. They're really stuck on that, ain't they? Yeah.
Let's see here. The first thing they would say is ouch, 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 ouch. And then they'd fall quiet.
Heath French, the one with the first black lines, I see a dog on fire, like shape in it. Imagination.
You're on better sedatives than me. To each their own. What else we got?
Kennard Christensen says, what's disheartening is you try to do your best, then you go to their house and find it laying in the yard rusting away.
Well, that'll happen. That'll happen. That's kind of that goes back into, and I don't know if you're cycling way back in the comments.
No,
is
it's
these
recent.
Current? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about perfectionism, right? And how do you get around that and say, you know, actually put something out the door? And you got to get out of your own way. You got to get out of your own self. You have to realize the world's bigger than, you know, party of one. It's very hard to do. And because you put so much of yourself into what we do, right? Like, because you love it. You love it. But that customer that bought something from you on a weekend while eating a corn dog, right? They purchased something for $20. Like, they're not sold to it, right? Like, they're not necessarily sold to it. Or maybe it was for way more money than that, but they got fat stacks that they don't have to care, right? And that's just how they live their life. They buy really expensive stuff, and when it bores them, they let it go to waste. You know, you don't know how that goes. My big advice for that is just don't take that personally. It's hard to not take it personally, but just don't. I took it personally when I had a lot of family members. When I was in my earlier days of blacksmithing, I would make Christmas gifts for everybody because I thought, well, man, they really care about this thing that I'm doing, so I'm going to make them Christmas gifts. No, it was just short of being given back to me next Christmas, and as a Christmas gift, right? It's like, most of them found their way to junk drawers or behind couches hidden somewhere, fell in behind entertainment centers, lost, never to be found again, things like that. And I took that personally, right? I'm like, well, I went through all this trouble, and don't you know how much time it took me and how much effort I put in and all that sort of stuff? And no, they don't. They don't have a clue. I was being too much in my own way as a smith. I'm like, oh, my feelings are the most important feelings in the room right now. And they're just not when you give them to people or when you sell an item. You don't know how they'll cherish that item. It's up to you to learn to enjoy the process of forging and not so much the end product, and expect that product to go on for 1,000,000 years and them to write, Viking sagas about you, right? No one's going to be writing any sagas about me. That's not going to happen.
Somebody will probably email with one now that you've said that.
Somebody's going to email us one now?
Yeah.
Oh. But it's kind of it's a tough thing to deal with as an artist or as a blacksmith, or, when you're really digging something you're doing and you run into that opposition of other people aren't just as excited about it as you are. You just got to give them a little bit of grace when it comes to that, and just don't take it personally. Maybe not give them items that took you 400 hours to make, unless you really know the person's going to really, really appreciate the thing that you're giving them.
Minion Smithy, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, just got here, better late than never. Hi from Minion Smithy.
Hello, hello. So, Roy rants, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I probably took way longer than the 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's all right. The chat's a little slower this evening. We only have a few more questions left. We could probably answer them in a few more minutes.
Drop me some more questions there, Jess.
Dan's Creation, we are our streaming service. We're streaming on YouTube using OBS. Our internet is Spectrum.
Yep.
Speargrass says, Jess, I know you have done a little bit. What is your favorite thing about smithing? I really like working with copper. I think it's a lot of fun. I do a lot of more like on the texturing and flat side of things, like bowls and jewelry and stuff, but I have done a little bit. I've made a pair of copper handles once. That was pretty neat. Yep. Joshua Rivas says, that's a beautiful hammer I'd be proud to own.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate all the accolades there, ladies and gents. I really do. That, I appreciate that. I'm glad you all came in and watched. Anyhow, next live stream, I don't know if I'll still be working on this or not. I might be sculpting it by then. Not quite sure yet. I want to get back on our pot rack, our viney pot rack. So it's actually in the back there. It's been sitting there haunting me. Like, I want to get back to it because that's a lot of fun to do. And so we might do that in the next live stream, the giveaway live stream. A little bit more peppy, a little bit more show, a little more pizzazz, right? And do that. So that's something to look forward to, upcoming. I appreciate everybody spending their time with us this evening anyhow, watching me do something that's kind of boring. Usually I do this type of work when I'm got earbuds in and I am listening to podcasts or music or something to pass the time, or like audiobooks. Like, I'll listen to stuff like that just so this way, this will make you go crazy. This will literally make you go insane. It's fine for the first hour, but then after that, it's like a leaky faucet dripping when you haven't slept in a week or something like that, right? And you're really trying to sleep. Yeah, it's kind of like that. So I know it's not as much fun to watch on camera. Or if you're listening in your earbuds, it's a real hoot. If you're at work right now working a piece of machinery, hopefully you haven't fell in. Oh. But so we're good? No more questions right now?
Let me see here.
Because I can go on a final note here.
Oh, let me see. Do we have any more questions? Stephen Watkins said, just in time for a Roy rant. That's not a question, though.
Yeah, there was. Just in time for a Roy rant.
No, I think
Well,
we're good on questions.
instead you haven't taken search too much.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it on a little different note here.
Huh?
I have some final
Way
thoughts I'd
back.
like to share and kind of just showcase here
Mhm.
a little bit. Oh, I might even go to camera number 2 for it here in a second. But so I would like to leave you with a bit of encouragement, words of encouragement this evening, and that hopefully you can take and apply to your own lives and in your own work. And that word of encouragement is really it's simply get out there and just forge. Let the work speak for itself. Give yourself time to become that master that you want to be someday. And, don't get caught up in everything that we get caught up in. I don't have the right tools. I don't have the right stuff. I don't live in the right neighborhood. Whatever. Whatever your excuses are, put all those aside and just do the work. And if you apply yourself with diligence over time, you will get to where you would like to be in the future. But it's going to require diligence and time. There's no shortcuts in this craft. You don't wake up one day and just because you went out and bought a big Yang power hammer, now you are a professional and you are the Gandhi of blacksmithing, right? That's not how things work. It's just not. You aren't the ultimate master now just because you've got the most tools. It's not the way it works. You don't have to be educated to do this. You don't have to have a ton of money to do this. You have to have passion, heart, and diligence over time. And if you have that, you can one day be making ironwork just like what I'm doing right here. And please don't take this as some arrogant boast. This isn't me saying, oh, my work is what you need to obtain to. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying this is where I want to be with my ironwork right now. I want to be further than this in the future, but this is where I'm at right now, is this type of ironwork that I'm doing. And I'm happy. I'm satisfied with that type of work. I've gotten to a certain place that I never thought I would have been at, to be honest with you, when I first got into this craft. So with that, and on my final note here, I'm going to show you one of the first items that I was ever oh so proud of. And we'll show it over here on camera number 2, Jess. Mm-hmm. So obviously, this is where I've graduated up to, that I'm super excited about and I'm happy about. I'll take this out of the way for just a second. And this is where I started from. This is an old railroad spike tomahawk that I just thought I had arrived as a blacksmith.
Is that your initials stamped on the side of it?
Yep, where they are at CCFA. Mm-hmm. That's back when it was Christ-centered forge and anvil versus Christ-centered ironworks. I had a twist in there. Railroad spike tomahawk. And I wish you could show this better, but you see that gap in there. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you can see that all right.
Yep.
So, obviously takes a great edge. You see the waviness? Oh. So this is where I started, right? This had been after 3 years of forging, self-taught forging and ambition. 3 years. This was where I was at. This is what I had obtained to at that point in time. And boy, howdy, did I think I knew it all. then. If you would have asked me, I've been like, yeah, baby, I know how to do this. I'm a master blacksmith in my little 6x10 garden shed out in the back of my yard, right? It's like, look at that ironwork right there.
Granddad says that's worth some money in this crowd.
Look at that twist. Isn't that worth $100? And yeah, and this is where I was at. 13 years later, here's where I'm at. This is the type of ironwork I'm doing now.
Speargrass says, hey, it's got a blade. That's not a Roy Adams piece.
Yeah. Let's go to main cam.
All right.
Main cam. So, again, like I said, this is where I was at. I thought for sure I knew it all at that point in time. It's amazing how a decade more has changed my opinions on a lot of things and views on stuff. So, whew, looks like we're getting some rain into the shop here. That's going to be our call sign to check out, huh?
It is.
All right, I'll finish it up with the watery eye thing. So, if your work looks like this, and you might be thinking to yourself, maybe you're thinking to yourself, that looks pretty darn good, right? By your estimation. Keep at it. Keep working. Keep putting in the time. Keep putting in the diligence. And you too can be doing exactly what you're seeing me do here. It's not complex. It's not rocket science. It just requires your effort and your passion and drive to do it. So that's it. God bless each and every last one of you. I will shut up now. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Again, check the description down below where the next live stream will be. And we'll be doing a giveaway live stream where we'll be giving away what? The 8th?
The next date.
Number 8.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Swedge block number 8 in the Holland Anvil Swedge blocks for the Year of the Swedge series. So be sure to check out that live stream. And as always, God bless each and every last one of you. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.